What if your husband bought a secret $15,000 watch while you sat freezing at home? This is the story of Eloise, a woman shivering through a Parisian winter in a beautiful ice-cold apartment. Her husband, Laurent, always says he's broke, too broke for the heating bill, too broke to fix a leak, too broke to help her sick mother. But Eloise is about to discover the shocking truth. It's not about money. It's about what he's willing to spend it on, and who he's willing to spend it for. This is a quiet story about a marriage crumbling from the inside out, and one woman's journey to find her own warmth in the city of light. Disclaimer: this channel features fictional psychological stories created for emotional exploration and storytelling purposes. All characters and events are fictional. The wind howled outside the window, a lonely sound that found every crack in the elegant old building. It was the kind of cold that felt personal. Inside the apartment in the 16th arrondissement, the chill was quieter but just as deep. Eloise sat curled on the large modern sofa, wearing a sweater that had gone soft with age. Her fingers trembled, but not just from the temperature. They held a single sheet of paper, the electricity bill. The number at the bottom was a sharp, black shock against the white page. It was astronomical. She pulled the worn wool tighter around her shoulders. The apartment was beautiful, a testament to Laurent's taste. Sleek furniture, a polished wood floor, abstract art on the walls. But it was also a freezer. She hadn't dared to turn the heater to its full power for weeks, choosing instead to wear layers and feel the creeping numbness in her toes. Across the room, at a gleaming oak desk that caught the weak winter light, Laurent was absorbed in his brand-new MacBook. The soft tap-tap of his typing was the only sound besides the wind. Eloise took a breath, the air feeling like ice in her lungs. She stood up, the bill a stiff rectangle in her hand, and walked over to him. He didn't look up. She could see a reflection, pale and small, in the dark surface of his screen. Laurent? Her voice was softer than she intended. He made a non-committal sound, his eyes still on his work. This month's electricity bill, it's very high. Can we split it? Finally, he glanced up. His expression was smooth, untroubled. I don't have the money right now, my love, he said, his tone as casual as if he were commenting on the rain. You know I'm tied up with that investment capital? It's tight. It was a sentence she knew by heart. Tied up. Tight. Next month. A familiar sour feeling, like old metal, coated her tongue. She didn't argue, she just nodded, a tiny movement, and turned away from the desk. She wandered back into the living room, but now she saw it with different eyes. She saw the cold, modern beauty of it all. The chrome lamp he'd had to have, the designer rug that cost more than her first year's rent in Paris, the glass coffee table that showed every fingerprint. This was Laurent's kingdom, his showcase. And she was the quiet ghost who lived in it, tiptoeing around the expenses, shrinking herself to fit the budget he controlled. She was a piece of the decor that had grown faded. Without thinking, her feet carried her to the bedroom. It was neat, impersonal. Her gaze drifted to the top of the wardrobe, to a shadowy corner. There, dusty and forgotten, sat a small, hard-shelled suitcase. It was a relic from another life. She had bought it with her first paycheck from a cafe job, back when she was a bright-eyed student who believed in independence and fresh starts. It had been her companion on solo trips, filled with dreams and cheap train tickets. She dragged a chair over, climbed up, and lifted it down. A puff of dust danced in the gray light. She ran her fingers over the scuffs and the old airline sticker that was half peeled off. The plastic felt brittle under her touch. A clear, startling thought echoed in her mind, as if someone else had spoken it. Maybe I should have left a long time ago. Why did it take me so long to see it? The thought was so big and so quiet that it terrified her. She shoved the suitcase back into its dark corner, her heart hammering against her ribs. That night, Laurent fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and even. Eloise lay rigid beside him, staring at the ceiling, where streetlights painted shifting patterns. The cold from the window seeped under the duvet. The number on the bill and the sight of that old suitcase swirled in her head like a storm. A desperate, quiet anger began to simmer in her chest. Tied up with investment capital. What did that even mean? He never showed her the numbers, the emails, the reports. It was always a vague, professional struggle she was told to understand. Moving with a slowness that felt both fearful and deliberate, she slid out of bed. The floor was icy under her bare feet. She padded into the living room where Laurent's laptop sat closed on the glorious oak desk. She opened it. The screen glowed to life, bathing her tense face in a bluish light. It asked for a password. She held her breath and typed in the one she knew. His mother's birthday. The home screen unlocked. Her hands were shaking. This was a line she had never crossed. She clicked through folders labeled work, tax, investments. She opened spreadsheets, but the columns of numbers were meaningless to her. Her hope, thin and brittle, began to crack. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe he really was in trouble. She was about to close everything, to retreat back to bed in shame, when her mouse hovered over the browser icon. A single click. A window opened, still logged in from his last session. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a web page. The design was sleek, black, and luxurious. In the center of the screen was a photograph of a stunning man's watch, its steel and gold bracelet gleaming, its face elegant and severe. A Cartier. The page was not just a casual browse. A particular model was highlighted in green, and at the top of the screen, clear as day, was a notification box. Ordered XC78 delivered. Eloise's heart didn't just beat. It seemed to stop, then explode into a frantic, pounding riot against her breastbone. Her eyes flicked to the price displayed discreetly to the side, 15,000 euros. The cold she felt then had nothing to do with the Parisian winter. It was a deep, internal freeze, starting in the core of her stomach and spreading outwards until her very fingertips felt numb. It was the cold of a truth so stark it burned. Slowly, as if in a trance, she turned her head to look back toward the dark bedroom. She could just make out the shape of Laurent under the covers and sleeping peacefully, his face smooth and innocent in the gloom. She looked from his sleeping form back to the glowing screen, to the proof of the beautiful, expensive lie. No money for his wife's heating bill, the icy voice inside her whispered, but 15,000 euros for a watch? The morning after felt like walking on glass. Eloise moved through the apartment with a strange, careful calm. She made coffee, the smell bitter and strong. Laurent was already at the table, scrolling through news on his phone. The same phone he'd often handed to her in the past, saying, "Can you check if that client emailed me back, love? My hands are full." He'd never changed the password. She'd never had a reason to suspect she needed to. As he took a shower, the sound of the water, a steady hiss. His phone lay face down on the kitchen counter like a sleeping animal. Eloise stared at it. The cold certainty from last night had hardened into something sharp and clear. She needed to see it again. She needed proof that wasn't just a glowing screen in the dark. Her fingers were dry and cold as she picked it up. Tap, swipe, password. The home screen opened. Her thumb hovered over the email icon, then pressed. She didn't have to search. It was right there, near the top. An email with the subject. Your Cartier order confirmation. She opened it. There was the order number, Hammer XC7852. The price in bold, 19,000. A digital receipt. Another email from a personal shopper at the boutique thanking Monsieur Laurent for his exquisite taste and hoping he, or the lucky recipient, would enjoy the timepiece. The words blurred. The numbers didn't. 15,000. She thought of the heater, clicking on for just an hour at a time. She thought of the thinning elbows on her favorite coat. She put his phone back exactly as she found it. Then she picked up her own, its case cracked at the corner. She unlocked it. Her browser was still open to her own sad little searches. Affordable winter boots, how to repair a wool coat lining, cheapest groceries in the 16th. The contrast was so brutal, so stupidly funny, that a sound almost escaped her. A dry, choked thing that was nowhere near a laugh. She put her phone down, the screen dark. Sleep okay? Laurent asked, breezing into the kitchen, his hair damp. He smelled of expensive sandalwood soap. Fine, Eloise said, handing him his coffee. You! Like a rock. He took a sip and launched into a story about a new client, a big potential deal. It's all about perception, Elle. You have to look successful to attract success. Sometimes you have to invest in yourself to show your level. She nodded, stirring her own coffee until it was cold. The words invest in yourself buzzed in her ears like flies. She watched his wrist as he gestured. He was wearing his old, functional watch. A quiet, dangerous curiosity uncoiled inside her. Speaking of watches, she said, her voice light, almost airy, is your old one broken? I saw you were looking at new ones online. He stopped mid-sentence. For just a fraction of a second, his eyes flickered, a quick, darting movement of surprise and something else. Alarm. Then it was gone, smoothed over by a practiced, easy smile. Oh, that? He waved a dismissive hand. Just window shopping. Those things are a fortune. Where would I get that kind of money right now? He gave a little laugh, the same one he used when talking about his tight investments. He looked right at her, his expression open and believable. And in that moment, Eloise felt the last little thread of doubt snap. This wasn't just selfishness. This was something cleaner, colder. This was a lie, told right to her face, without a single ripple of guilt. He was good at it. He was probably used to it. She mirrored his smile, a slight upturn of her lips that felt like it was made of clay. Of course, she said, her voice sweet. Just dreaming. The day passed in a strange, slow-motion blur. Eloise cleaned things that were already clean. She tried to read, but the words meant nothing. All she could see was the smooth lie on his face, and behind it, the crisp lines of the digital receipt. In the late afternoon, Laurent emerged from the study wearing his best suit, the charcoal gray one that cost more than her entire first year of university. He adjusted his cufflinks, silver and sleek. Dinner with the potential clients I told you about, he said, not meeting her eyes in the hallway mirror as he checked his reflection. Might be late. Don't wait up. Have fun, she said, the hollow pleasantry dropping into the space between them. She stood by the window, hidden by the curtain, and watched him walk down the street. He walked with a confident swing, a man worth $10,000, a man too broke to split a heating bill. The winter twilight turned him into a sharp, elegant silhouette. And then the thought came. Didn't arrive with a shout, but with a whisper, slithering from a dark corner of her mind she'd refused to acknowledge. That watch, where is it? He wasn't wearing it. She'd never seen it. A purchase that big, that luxurious. Would he really just hide it in a drawer? Or was it gleaming right now on someone else's wrist? A gift that required a thank you from a personal shopper. A gift for a lucky recipient. The question of money curdled, twisting into something uglier, more intimate. The cold in the apartment seeped into a new, deeper place inside her. She didn't cry, she didn't break anything. A strange, focused stillness settled over her. She walked to his study. His laptop was there. She opened it, her movements methodical, precise. She found the emails again. She took her cracked phone. She positioned it over the screen, making sure the order number, the price, the date were all perfectly clear in the frame. Click. The camera shutter sound was loud in the quiet room. She found the browser history, the Cartier page. Click. She opened the bank app she'd seen him use, password, his mother's birthday, reversed. She navigated to the recent transactions. There it was, a debit for $15,000 to Cartier SA. Click, click. She saved every image to a hidden folder, one she'd never used before. As she put everything back exactly as it was, a new feeling rose, through the shock and the bitterness. It was thin and hard and quiet. It was the feeling of a door locking, not with a slam, but with a soft, final click. She looked at the photos on her phone, the proof glowing in her hand. All right, Laurent, she whispered to the empty, beautiful, freezing room. If this is the game, then I'll learn how to play. It was Eloise's birthday. The restaurant was the kind of place where the napkins were thicker than her winter socks, and the lights were so low everyone looked like they were in a beautiful, expensive secret. Laurent had made the reservation, of course. He was good at the grand gestures. Eloise had transferred her share of the rent a week early to afford her half of the bill she knew was coming. A birthday gift to herself. The pretense of being treated. Laurent was holding court. He'd ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than her monthly metro pass, and was now swirling it in his glass, talking about a brilliant new investment. The returns are going to be huge, Elle. Absolutely huge. It's all about knowing where to put your money. He leaned in, his eyes bright with the reflection of the candle. I'm even thinking, next quarter, maybe the new Porsche? The Taycan, a statement, you know? Eloise nodded, cutting a perfect tiny carrot on her plate. The food was exquisite and tasted like nothing. She felt a dull ache behind her eyes, the kind that came from holding a smile for too long. That sounds ambitious, she said. She took a sip of water, the ice clinking softly. Speaking of the house, the leak in the bathroom ceiling is getting worse. The plaster is bulging. Have you thought about when we can get it fixed? Laurent's smile didn't falter. He waved his hand, the one with his old functional watch, as if shooing away a gnat. Oh, that, yes, I've seen it. We'll get to it. But you have to understand, my love, you have to prioritize. Money in the right investments makes money. Money in a hole in the ceiling just fills a hole. He laughed at his own logic, a charming, easy sound. No cash for that right now. Patience. No cash. The words landed on the white tablecloth between them like two dead flies. Eloise looked at his wrist, at the watch that wasn't a Cartier, and thought of the 15,000 euros that had vanished into thin air, or onto someone else's arm. The anger was there, a hot, tight ball in her chest, but it was wrapped in layers of something heavier, a deep, sickening embarrassment. She was sitting here, paying to listen to this. Of course, she whispered, patience. Laurent's phone, a sleek black slab, lay on the table and beside his bread plate. He excused himself to visit the restroom, giving her shoulder a little squeeze as he passed. Order dessert if you want, anything. It's your day. She watched him weave between the tables, nodding at the maitre d'. The soft piano music swelled. She was alone with the flickering candle and the silent phone. Then the phone lit up. A notification slid across the locked screen. Bright white text against a dark background. Eloise wasn't trying to see it. She was just looking into the middle distance, trying to breathe through the embarrassment. But the words were there, clear and stark as a headline. See, my love, I'm speechless. The Cartier is so beautiful, so worthy of you. When will you wear it for me to see? Time didn't stop, it shattered. The gentle clink of cutlery, the murmur of conversations, the tinkling piano notes, all of it was sucked away into a roaring, silent vacuum. All she could hear was the wild, drumming pulse in her own ears. The words burned onto her retina. My love, the Cartier, worthy of you. She stared at the screen until it went dark again, leaving only her own pale, stunned reflection in the black glass. When Laurent returned, he was still smiling, wiping his hands on the fine linen napkin. So, dessert? The chocolate soufflé is supposed to be... He stopped. He was looking at her face. Eloise looked back at him. She saw it all with a terrible crystal clarity. The expertly tailored jacket that hugged his shoulders. The confident set of his jaw. The easy smile that was a perfect, functioning tool. She saw the man who talked about Porsches while their home crumbled. The man who claimed poverty while buying love tokens for someone named C. The magnificent, polished machine of his lies. A strange thing happened then. The hot ball of anger evaporated. The crushing embarrassment melted away. In their place spread a vast, quiet numbness, cold and smooth as a marble floor. It wasn't sadness. It was the end of confusion. She had been wrong. Not for believing he was broke. She was wrong for believing a single word that came out of his mouth. Wrong for thinking the problem was a missing share of a bill, when the problem was a missing share of a soul. He would rather see a jewel on his mistress's wrist than a dry ceiling over his wife's head. The math was finally hideously simple. Laurent frowned, a tiny crease appearing between his brows. Eloise, are you feeling all right? She picked up her wine glass. The red liquid was the color of a deep, old wound. She didn't sip it. She drank it all, in one long, steady swallow. It tasted like vinegar and finality. She set the empty glass down with a soft, definite clink. Then she looked at him, and she smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a cool, distant curve of her lips that felt like it belonged to someone else. Thank you for dinner, Laurent, she said, her voice clear and strangely light. And thank you for everything. He blinked, his head tilted slightly, the picture of charming bewilderment. He didn't understand the joke. He didn't hear the door slam shut. But Eloise heard it. The game was over. She was done playing. The email from her sister was short, and every word felt like a small, sharp stone. Mama is sick. It's her heart. The doctors say it's not an emergency yet, but she needs better medication, maybe a small procedure. The cost, you know how it is. I'm doing what I can, but I thought you should know. Eloise read it standing in the kitchen, the morning light making the cold, polished surfaces gleam. She felt the floor tilt slightly under her feet. Her mother, who had saved for a year to buy Eloise her warmest coat before she left for Paris. Her mother, whose voice on the phone always asked, "Are you eating enough? Is he treating you well?" A question Eloise had always answered with a bright, "Of course, Mama." Pride was a luxury she had clung to. She had never asked Laurent for money for herself, not truly. The bills were shared, the rent was shared. But personal things, gifts for her family, little treats, she had always paid from her own modest salary as a freelance translator. It was a point of quiet dignity in a marriage that had slowly stripped so many others away. But this was different. This was a hole in the roof of her other home, the one that lived in her heart. She found Laurent in his study. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, looking every bit the successful man he pretended to be. She stood in the doorway, the email printed on her face. "Laurent, I need to talk to you." He looked up, an expression of mild interest on his face. "What's wrong?" "It's my mother. She's ill. She needs some financial help for her treatment." The words tasted like ash. She forced herself to be clear, to be businesslike, to give him no room for misunderstanding. "I need to send money home. I can pay you back. I'll take on extra work. I can give you a repayment plan, with interest if you want. I need to borrow it." There, she had said it. She had laid her pride on his expensive oak desk like a sacrifice. Lauren's face transformed. The mild interest melted into a mask of profound, sorrowful concern. He leaned back in his leather chair, running a hand through his hair. He looked, for all the world, like a man carrying the weight of it all. "Oh, Eloise, mon Dieu, I'm so sorry to hear that." His voice was a low, sympathetic murmur. He stood up and came around the desk, reaching for her hands. She let him take them. They felt like blocks of ice in his warm grasp. "You know, if I had it, I would give it to you in a heartbeat. For your mother, of course." The "but" hung in the air between them, heavy and familiar. "But things are just impossible right now. The market, the investments are all locked up. Liquidity is zero." He shook his head, his eyes full of a perfect practiced regret. "I don't have the money, my love. I wish I did." "I don't have the money." The classic line. It fell on her ears, not as a shock, but as a dull, expected thud. The hot rush of shame that followed was the worst part. Shame for asking. Shame for putting herself in this position. Forever believing, even for a second, that he would see her family's crisis as his own. Her cheeks burned. He was still holding her hands, still wearing that sympathetic mask. "We'll think of something," he said soothingly. "Maybe you can ask a friend, or your sister can get a loan there. It's terrible timing. Just terrible." As he spoke, giving his useless, hollow comfort, the laptop on his desk, which had gone to sleep, suddenly woke up. The screen brightened with an automatic notification from his bank. A pop-up box, bold and cheerful, appeared in the center of the screen. "A payment confirmed. The Club Privé de Paris, annual membership fee, 5,000. Status completed." The words glowed in the dim room. Eloise's eyes flicked from Laurent's concerned face to the screen, then back to his face. He hadn't seen it. He was still performing his role as the regretfully broke husband. In that moment, something inside her didn't break. It simply froze solid. The burning shame turned icy. The helplessness crystallized into a cold, hard fact. 5,000 euros for a club, for a seat at a fancy table with other people like him. Her mother's medicine, her mother's comfort, her family's worry was worth less than that. To him, her family was not his family. Her emergency was an inconvenience. His luxury was a necessity. She gently pulled her hands from his. The touch felt unclean. "You're right," she said, her voice strangely flat and calm. "I'll think of something else." She turned and walked out of the study. She didn't slam the door. She closed it softly with a quiet click that felt more final than any bang. In the living room, she picked up her own old laptop. The numbness was a shield. She opened her contact list. She called an old university friend who worked at a bank. She emailed 2 translation agencies asking for any urgent yet high-volume projects they had. She messaged her sister, her fingers steady on the keys. "Don't worry, I'm handling it. Tell Mama I love her." Her mind worked with a clarity it hadn't possessed in years. She calculated, she planned, she reached out. She would work nights. She would sell the few pieces of jewelry she had that weren't gifts from him. She would fix this herself. And as she worked, under the surface of that cold, clear focus, another plan began to form. Not a plan to ask, not a plan to borrow. A plan to leave. It was just a sketch, a shadow, but it was there. He had shown her, with perfect, brutal clarity, exactly what she was worth to him. It was time to decide her own price. Eloise's ancient laptop, the one that wheezed and got hot enough to fry an egg, finally gave up its ghost with a sad little flicker and a permanent black screen. It happened in the middle of a crucial translation job, one of the extra projects she'd taken on to pay for her mother's medicine. For a moment, she just stared at the dark rectangle. a wave of pure panic crashing over her. This was her lifeline, her only tool to claw her way out. She had no savings for a new one. Asking Laurent was not even a thought that crossed her mind. It was a door that had been locked, bolted, and bricked over. At the shared co-working space she used sometimes, she must have looked truly desperate, sitting at a table and staring at her dead machine. A man named Mark, a friendly graphic designer she'd exchanged polite nods with for months, noticed. He was about her age, with kind eyes and ink stains on his fingers. "Looks like you've had a tech tragedy," he said, nodding at her laptop. "It's more of a tech murder," Eloise said, trying to laugh. It came out as a shaky breath. "And I have a deadline in 2 days." Mark thought for a second. "I have an old spare laptop at home," he offered. "It's nothing fancy, but it works perfectly. I was going to sell it, but you can borrow it for as long as you need. No rush." The kindness was so simple, so straightforward, it felt like a splash of warm water on her frozen hands. She was so accustomed to transactions, to hidden costs and emotional debts, that this clear no-strings offer made her eyes sting. She accepted, her voice thick with a gratitude that embarrassed her. That evening, she brought Mark's spare laptop home. It was clean, functional, and quiet. It felt like a piece of solid ground. Laurent came home late, as he often did. He threw his keys in the silver bowl by the door with a familiar clatter. His eyes landed on the unfamiliar laptop on the coffee table as he loosened his tie. "New toy?" he asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. "No," Eloise said, not looking up from the screen where she was furiously working. "Mine died. A colleague lent me his old one so I can finish my projects." "Oh?" Laurent's interest seemed genuine. He walked over, picking up a framed photo of them from a shelf and dusting it with his thumb, a meaningless, restless habit. "Which colleague?" "Mark, the graphic designer from the co-working space." "Mark," Laurent repeated as if tasting the name. Then, to her astonishment, he smiled. A wide, relaxed, genuinely pleased smile. "That's fantastic. What a nice guy. Really good of him." He sounded relieved, happy even. He put the photo down and clapped his hands together softly. "See? Problem solved. No need to stress about it. Good that you have people like that around." He wandered towards the kitchen, whistling a little tune, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Eloise's fingers stopped moving over the keyboard. She stared at the letters on the screen, but they swam and blurred. A strange, sour understanding began to drip, slow and cold, into her mind. She had just told her husband that another man, a kind, attentive, helpful man, had stepped in to provide for a need he had refused to meet. She had expected suspicion or jealousy, or at least some awkwardness, a flicker of possessiveness, something that said, "I am your husband. I should be the one to fix this." Instead, she got delight. She got approval. It wasn't that he trusted her. It was that he was glad to be off the hook. He saw Mark not as a rival, but as a volunteer, a relief pitcher coming in to handle a problem he couldn't be bothered with. Her crisis, her need, was a burden, and Laurent was absolutely thrilled that someone else had picked it up. She was not a wife to be cherished and protected. She was a liability to be managed, a minor debt on his balance sheet. And nothing made a businessman happier than having someone else cover a cost. The initial sting of humiliation, the feeling of being a charity case, melted into something colder and sharper, a bleak, crystalline irony. She almost wanted to laugh. All the silent battles, the swallowed words, the careful accounting of her worth in this marriage, and her value, in his eyes, was that of a successfully outsourced problem. She looked at Laurent's back as he rummaged in the fridge, still humming. He wasn't afraid of losing her. The thought had never even occurred to him. Why would he fear losing a burden? The last of the fog in her heart burned away, leaving a landscape that was barren, but perfectly, terribly clear. "Well done, Laurent," she thought, the words forming in her mind like ice crystals. "You've taught me my own worth. What a profound lesson. And you taught it with your indifference." This is Inner Echo Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great stories. "They're coming at 8, Laurent announced, not looking up from his phone. "The Brevals. He's a potential investor, very old money. This needs to be perfect." Eloise, who was trying to mend the thinning elbow of her favorite wool coat with a discreet patch, paused. A dinner party. Perfect. That meant hours of shopping, cooking, cleaning, and performing. All unpaid, all expected. "What should I make?" she asked, her voice already tired. "Something classic. Impressive, but not trying too hard. You know, your duck confit is always good. And a tarte tatin. Go to that little market, get the best ingredients. Finally, he looked up. His eyes scanned her, sitting there with her needle and thread. They landed on the coat in her lap. His nose wrinkled slightly, as if he'd caught a whiff of something stale. "And for God's sake, Eloise," he said, his tone light but edged with real annoyance, "wear something decent, not that old thing. You look like a struggling student in it." The needle pricked her thumb. A tiny bead of blood welled up. She looked at the coat. It was warm. It was hers. The elbows were shiny because she'd worn it for years, through winters where she'd chosen between a new coat and paying her share of the utilities. "I don't have anything decent that's warm enough for going to the market," she said flatly. Laurent sighed, the long-suffering sigh of a man burdened by mundane details. He reached for his wallet, and for a wild, foolish second, Eloise's heart leapt. He was going to give her money. He was going to say, "Get yourself a new coat." He pulled out a credit card. But it wasn't his sleek platinum one. It was her own card, the one she paid off with her translation work. He must have taken it from her wallet for some errand. He handed it to her. "Here, use this. Just find something appropriate. Remember, first impressions." He handed her back her own money and asked her to spend it to look the part for his investor. The insult was so profound, so casually delivered, it stole the air from her lungs. She took the card, the plastic feeling slimy in her fingers. She said nothing. There were no words big enough to hold the humiliation. The dinner party was a masterpiece of her own silent labor. She went to the market, shivering in her indecent coat. She spent her own money on the duck, the apples, the butter. She cleaned the already clean apartment until it shone like a museum exhibit. She cooked for hours, her hair sticking to her damp forehead, the smell of rich food making her feel slightly sick. At 8 o'clock sharp, the Brevals arrived. Monsieur Breval had a handshake like a vice. Madame Breval wore a scarf that probably cost more than Eloise's laptop. Laurent was magnificent, charming, self-deprecating, full of shrewd insights about the market. He poured the expensive wine he'd bought for the occasion. Eloise played her role. She smiled the perfect, closed-lipped smile. She carried platters to the table. She complimented Madame Breval's scarf. She laughed at the right moments. She was the gracious, effortless hostess, the beautiful backdrop to Laurent's performance. As she served the duck, Laurent was holding forth. "And that's why integrity is the only real currency. People sense it." Madame Breval smiled at Eloise. "Your husband is a fascinating man, and such a lovely home you keep. This meal is exquisite." "Thank you," Eloise said, her smile muscles aching. She looked at Laurent, basking in the praise, in the attention. She looked at the investors, eating the food she'd bought and cooked, and she saw it with total, chilling clarity. She was not a partner here. She was a piece of the set dressing, the live-in caterer, the curated prop that proved Laurent could support a stylish, quiet wife who didn't make trouble. Her exhaustion, her cold fingers, the phantom ache in her thumb from the needle prick, none of it mattered. Only the illusion did. The evening stretched on. Her laughter became an automatic sound. Her nods were mechanical. Inside she was a vault, silently sealing shut. Finally, the Brevals left with promises to talk business. The door clicked closed. The apartment was suddenly very quiet, filled with the ghost of cigar smoke and the wreckage of the dining table. Laurent stretched a triumphant, weary sigh. "That went brilliantly. Did you see his face when I mentioned the Zurich portfolio?" He walked into the kitchen where Eloise was already running hot water, filling the sink with soap. He patted her shoulder, a firm, congratulatory thump. "You were great. Perfect, really. Well done." She didn't turn around. She kept scrubbing a pot, the warm water doing nothing to thaw the cold knot in her stomach. The touch of his hand felt like a brand. He lingered, waiting for her usual tired smile, her murmured, "I'm glad it went well." Instead, Eloise kept her eyes on the greasy water. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement, flat and solid as a stone dropped into a still pond. "Next time you need to entertain clients," she said, "hire a catering service. I'm done." The silence behind her was sudden and complete. The triumphant energy evaporated. He didn't understand. This wasn't in the script. But Eloise just kept washing the dishes one by one, scrubbing away the last traces of the performance. It started as a strange dripping sound inside the wall. Then a dark bloom appeared on the living room ceiling, right below the upstairs bathroom. By the time Laurent came home, a steady stream of brownish water was weeping through the plaster, pooling on the polished floor. The beautiful, cold apartment was literally falling apart. Laurent stood in the doorway, his briefcase dangling from his hand. He didn't look at the water. He looked at Eloise, who was on her knees with a stack of their best towels she'd bought, trying to soak up the mess. His face didn't show concern for the damage or worry about the cost. It tightened into immediate, sharp accusation. "What happened?" His voice was a blade. "What did you do?" Eloise sat back on her heels, a soaked, heavy towel in her hands. She looked up at him, water dripping from her wrists. She felt nothing. No surprise, no hurt. It was just the next step in a dance she knew by heart. "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice eerily calm. "The pipe in the wall burst. It's old." "But you were here," he said, as if that explained everything. He threw his briefcase on a dry patch of sofa and ran a hand through his hair, the picture of a man besieged by incompetence. "You must have heard something, noticed something. How could you let it get this bad?" Let it, as if she controlled the aging plumbing, as if her job was to stand guard over the pipes. He paced, avoiding the puddle, his expensive shoes clicking on the dry parts of the floor. "This is a disaster. We need a plumber, an emergency plumber. On a Saturday night, do you have any idea what that will cost?" He stopped pacing and looked at her again, but this time that the accusation had melted into something else, a kind of weary, practical resolve. The solution had already presented itself to him. It was always the same solution. "You have your savings," he said. It wasn't a question. "The money from your mother's situation, you said you managed to keep some back. We'll use that for the plumber and the repairs." Eloise just stared. The savings he referred to was the tiny, hard-won buffer she'd scraped together after sending money home, the result of weeks of extra work and skipped meals, her lifeline, her escape fund, though she hadn't fully admitted that to herself yet. He mistook her silence for hesitation and softened his tone, switching to the script of the reasonable partner. "I'll pay you back, of course, as soon as this next deal closes. You know I'm good for it. It's just a loan for our home. Our home." The words echoed in the damp, dripping room. She looked from his expectant face to the water-stained ceiling, to the ruined towels in her hands. She thought of the Cartier watch, the club membership, the new MacBook, the dinners he expensed. She thought of him handing her back her own credit card for his investor dinner. And in that moment, the final puzzle piece clicked into place with such force it was almost audible. "Oh," she thought, the realization spreading through her not as a shock, but as a deep, settling cold. "I see now. In this beautiful, expensive apartment, you are just a privileged guest, a very demanding one. And I am the staff, the manager, the one responsible for the light bulbs and the leaking pipes and the empty fridge." It was so simple, so obvious. He inhabited the space. She maintained it. He enjoyed the benefits. She bore the costs. He was a tenant in the life they shared, and she was the landlord, expected to fix everything while he complained a lot about the rent. A profound, terrifying calm settled over her. The kind of calm that comes after a long battle, when you finally know you've lost, and that knowledge sets you free. She stood up slowly, the wet towel dripping on the floor. She looked at him, her face a smooth, unreadable mask. There was no anger left to fight with, only certainty. "All right," she said, her voice flat and clear. "I'll handle it." Laurent's shoulders slumped in visible relief. The crisis, in his mind, was delegated, solved. "Good," he said, already turning away, pulling out his phone. "Call someone good. Don't just get the cheapest." Eloise didn't answer. She walked to the kitchen, picked up her phone, and began searching for a plumber. She would call one. She would pay for it with her own money. She would oversee the repairs. Because she had decided something far more important than how to fix a pipe. She had decided to stop being the landlord of a life that was crumbling around her. She would handle this last repair, and then she would handle her own exit, permanently. The studio was on the 5th floor of an old building in the 11th arrondissement, with no elevator. The stairs were worn in the middle from 100 years of footsteps. But the windows faced south, and on a Tuesday afternoon, a square of buttery winter sunlight painted the bare wooden floor. It was small. You could almost stand in the center and touch every wall. But the light was real. The silence was her own. It smelled of old wood and fresh paint, not of expensive polish and hidden decay. The landlady, a sharp-eyed woman with kind hands, looked at Eloise's cracked phone and her simple clothes. "You work?" she asked. "I'm a translator," Eloise said. The woman nodded as if that was an honest, respectable thing. First month, last month, deposit. You can pay? Eloise opened her banking app, showing the balance, the money left after her mother's medicine, and the plumber for Laurent's pipe. It was enough. She transferred the funds right there, her finger tapping the screen with a finality that sent a thrill through her veins. No hesitation, no asking permission. It was her money, buying her freedom. It's yours, the landlady said, handing over the keys. They felt heavy and solid. Back in the apartment in the 16th, Eloise moved with a quiet, methodical purpose. She pulled the old student suitcase from the top of the wardrobe. This time, she didn't just touch it. She opened it. She took only what was hers, the soft sweaters worn thin at the elbows, the sturdy boots she'd bought for her first Parisian winter, a few books, their spines cracked from love, not display. A framed photograph of her mother and sister, smiling in a sun-drenched garden far away. A single coffee mug, a gift from a friend a lifetime ago. She packed the borrowed laptop from Mark, placing it carefully on top. She would return it to him with her deepest thanks. She left everything else. The silk blouses Laurent had bought her that never felt right. The expensive skincare on the bathroom counter. The sleek impersonal bedding. The fancy kitchen gadgets she'd rarely used. Even the dead laptop, its corpse, remained on the desk. She took nothing that was a shared purchase, nothing that could be argued over. She had arrived with one suitcase of dreams. She would leave with one suitcase of reality. As she zipped the case closed, it was light, almost disappointingly so. It held so little of the life she'd lived here. But its lightness made her stand straighter. On the gleaming kitchen counter, the site of so many small humiliations, she did not leave a long emotional letter. Words had failed her for too long in this place. Instead, she left two pieces of paper, neatly side by side. The first was a printed spreadsheet. It was clean organized, a testament to her meticulous nature. Columns listed dates, descriptions, amounts. Electricity bill, Jan 2023, paid in full. Groceries for investor dinner, paid. Plumber emergency call-out, paid. It was a financial autopsy of their last 2 years, a cold, hard ledger of her contributions. At the bottom, a final line read, total, a significant sum. Beneath that, in a slightly smaller font, she had typed, this is not an invoice. This is proof that I tried. You did not. The second paper was the divorce petition. She had seen a lawyer, using the last of her courage and a chunk of her savings. Her signature was already at the bottom, clear and firm. A line waited blankly beside it for Laurent. She took one last walk through the cold, beautiful rooms. She felt a pang, but it wasn't for Laurent or the life they'd pretended to have. It was the bittersweet ache for the woman she'd been when she arrived, so full of hopeful, fragile trust. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who knew the cost of things and the price of her own peace. She put on her worn-out coat, the one he hated, and it felt like armor. She picked up the handle of her almost empty suitcase. The wheels made a soft rolling sound on the parquet, a sound of departure. She did not look back. She opened the front door, stepped into the hallway, and pulled the door closed behind her. It shut with a soft, precise click, not a slam. In the quiet of the elegant hallway, she whispered the words to the closed door. Goodbye, my difficult tenant. The call came on the second evening, just as the last of the pale sun was fading from the bare walls of Eloise's new studio. She was unpacking her books, placing them on a shelf made of cinder blocks and a plank of sanded wood. Her phone vibrated on the floor beside her. The screen glowed with his name. She sat back on her heels, wiped her dusty hands on her jeans, and answered, "Hello, Laurent." His voice wasn't hurt or worried or even sad. It was sharp with irritation, the sound of a man whose routine had been inconveniently disrupted. "You're really gone?" he demanded, no greeting. "What is this, Eloise? What's the big drama? Just come home and we can talk about it." Eloise looked around her tiny, sun-washed room, the suitcase open on the floor, the single mug waiting by the sink. This was home. She felt a profound calm settle over her, as if she were listening to a storm rage on the other side of a very thick window. "There is no big drama, Laurent," she said, her voice clear and even. She could almost see him on the other end, pacing the polished floor, unable to comprehend the stillness in her tone. "It's just a lot of little things. Too many little things." "What little things?" he snapped, frustration boiling over. "Because of a few bills? A little misunderstanding?" "Too many bills," she corrected gently. "Too many times you said, I don't have the money, and not enough willingness. She paused, letting the word hang in the air between them, across the phone lines of Paris. You don't lack money, Laurent. You only lacked willingness. For me. She could hear his quick breath on the other end, a stutter of surprise. She continued, her words falling like precise, measured drops. I didn't want to live with someone whose willingness was reserved only for himself, she said, and for his mistress. There. She had said it. The word hung in the quiet of her studio, no longer a secret, no longer a sharp stone in her own pocket. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It wasn't a silence of guilt or of being caught. It was the silence of pure, utter bewilderment. He didn't speak. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to explain. He was simply blank. The connection between her words and his actions, between the little things and this catastrophic result, was a bridge his mind could not cross. That silence was the most powerful, the most terrifying answer he could have given. It confirmed everything. He didn't understand because he had never tried to. He had never seen her as a partner whose feelings could accumulate, whose spirit could erode. She had been furniture, and furniture doesn't get up and leave over a few scratches. The quiet stretched. Eloise didn't fill it. She simply waited, at peace with the void. Finally, he made a sound, a kind of baffled exhale. I don't understand what you want me to say. And there it was, the final truth. You don't have to say anything, Eloise said softly. The papers on the counter explain everything that matters. Please sign them. She ended the call. She didn't slam the phone down. She just pressed the red button and placed the phone gently on the wooden plank that was now her bookshelf. She let out a long, slow breath. It felt like the first true breath she'd taken in years. There was no weight on her chest, only space and light and a quiet so profound it felt like a sound of its own. Across Paris, in the elegant, cold apartment, Laurent stood holding his silent phone. He looked around. The silence here was different. It was heavy, accusatory. He walked to the kitchen and saw the 2 pieces of paper she had left. He picked up the spreadsheet first. His eyes scanned the columns, the dates, the amounts. His brow furrowed. It looked like a business document, something he might skim in a meeting. He couldn't connect these dry numbers to the feeling of a wife leaving. It just looked like admin. Then he picked up the divorce petition. His own name, her signature, the blank line waiting for him. A strange, unfamiliar sensation prickled at the base of his skull. It wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't even clear regret. It was a cold drip of unease. The solid, predictable stage of his life had a new, unexpected trap door in it. And she had opened it and stepped through. For the first time, a transaction had not gone his way, and he couldn't see the ledger that explained why. He sat down heavily on one of the stylish, uncomfortable bar stools. The apartment, for all its beauty, felt suddenly terribly empty. Not just of her, but of something else. The invisible buffer she had provided, the quiet absorption of life's small costs. He was alone with the silence, the spreadsheet, and the first faint, chilling whisper of consequence. But for Eloise, it was already too late for any of that to matter. The Parisian winter, which had felt like it lived inside her bones, had finally loosened its grip. In Eloise's small studio, the south-facing windows did their job. A square of golden, honeyed light moved across the floorboards each day, and she found herself arranging her chair, her little reading rug, to follow its path. She was a plant, learning to turn towards the sun again. On her tiny balcony, no bigger than a tabletop, she had placed 3 terracotta pots. In them grew geraniums, bright, defiant red ones, and some trailing ivy she'd rescued from a discount bin at the market. They were her first living things, entirely her own responsibility. She watered them in the mornings, her fingertips brushing the cool soil. Sometimes she talked to them, silly, encouraging whispers. "Look at you," she'd say to a new bud. "Well done." Her life was quiet, built on simple rhythms. She woke with the light. She worked at her desk, translating articles about architecture and art, the words flowing more easily in the peaceful space. She cooked simple meals for one, eating at the small table by the window, watching the city breathe below. In the evenings, she read or simply sat, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. Laughter from a cafe, a distant siren, the chatter of sparrows. There were moments of loneliness, of course. A pang when she made a cup of tea and realized there was no one to share the pot. A hollow space beside her in the narrow bed. But this loneliness was different. It was clean, it was hers. It wasn't the desperate, frozen loneliness of being invisible in someone else's home. This was the spacious, sometimes aching quiet of a room you are furnishing by yourself, one careful piece at a time. It was a healthy solitude. One afternoon, her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking a comfortable silence. It was a message from Mark. She'd returned his laptop months ago with a thank you note and a box of good chocolates. They'd exchanged a few friendly messages since, about work or a good bakery he'd found. The message read, "Hi, Eloise. A friend just bailed on me. I have 2 tickets to that photography exhibition, Paris Unseen, at the Cartier-Bresson Foundation tomorrow evening. I know you appreciate this kind of thing. No pressure at all, but if you'd like to go, I'd be happy for the company. Could just be the exhibition or maybe a coffee after. Let me know." She read it twice. The invitation was clear but light. It held no presumption. No pressure at all. Could just be. It was an open door, not a push through it. It was the opposite of a demand. Eloise didn't reply immediately. She stood up and walked to her little balcony, pushing open the French doors. The spring air was cool and soft, carrying the smell of bread from the boulangerie on the corner. She leaned on the iron railing, looking out. Across the rooftops of the 11, she could see the very top of the Eiffel Tower, a familiar gray silhouette against a pale blue sky. For years, that view had been a symbol of a life she thought she was supposed to have, a beautiful, distant, cold monument. Now it was just part of the city she lived in, a city where she now had her own key, her own light, her own stubborn red flowers. She had left the fortress of someone else's making. The drawbridge was up, the portcullis down behind her. Here, in her own small tower, she held the keys, not just to the physical door, but to her own time, her own peace, her own willingness to open up. The power of that thought was a quiet hum in her chest. It wasn't about saying no to Mark. He was kind. The exhibition sounded wonderful. It was about knowing she had the right to choose her yes, not out of loneliness or obligation or a fear of being rude, but from a place of genuine, unrushed readiness. She smiled, a small, private curve of her lips that held no performance, no hidden bitterness. She went back inside, picking up her phone. She typed a reply, her thumbs moving slowly, thoughtfully. "Hi, Mark. The exhibition sounds wonderful, and thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm a bit swamped with a deadline this week and need some quiet evenings. But I'd love to take a rain check for another time if the offer stands. Hope you find someone to go with and enjoy it." She sent it. It was polite, appreciative, and honest. It protected her fragile new peace without shutting a door forever. It was a choice. She placed the phone back on the desk, screen down. She picked up her small watering can, the green enamel one she'd found at a flea market, and stepped back onto the balcony. She watered her geraniums, watching the dark circle spread in the soil, giving life to something she had chosen to nurture. Out on the street, the trees that had been bare skeletal claws against her window in the 16th arrondissement were now frothing with tender, bright green leaves. The cruel winter had passed. Spring, tentative and undeniable, was pushing through every crack. Eloise took a deep breath of the new air. Someday, perhaps, Mark, she thought, not with sadness, but with a calm certainty. But on my own time, when I'm truly ready.
Okay, what do you think about this story? I was so mad for her when she found that watch receipt. What a slimy guy telling her that he's broke by dropping 15 grand. The part where he was happy another man helped her with a laptop. That was cold. So if you like the story like this, please subscribe and like. Thank you for your listening.